Thank you. Sorry for the loud noise there, but all right, welcome back. We are COMP2112. That's advanced client-side JavaScript. I like to call it advanced client-side scripting in the fall 2022 semester at Georgian. And it's week 4 officially, week only 3 for us. And it's part 1 of our broadcast and recording. I'll see if I can split this up in at least 2 parts today. Again, disclaimer and warning. The content that I'm about to share with you is slated for 4 hours, and I've only got 2 hours, so, or 3 hours, let's say, with you guys. So lots of stuff, as always, and never enough time. So let's get into it. So please bear with me, and I do apologize in advance if I'm going to go fast compared to last week. All right. So if I was fast last week, I might be a little bit faster this week. Just letting you know. Hopefully that won't kill you. I know. Right, so just putting it out there because so get ready to to use your little fingers to type and to do whatever you have to do. So we are week 4, and this week we're supposed to be doing full credit with local storage, and we're going to be talking also about an intro to MVC design pattern, as well as how to deploy to GitHub pages, which is something we're going to be doing together, right? So that's something that we're doing this week. Your in-class exercises 1 and 2, hopefully you've been able to submit those and all that stuff that's been happening throughout the week, throughout these last couple of weeks. And your in-class exercise 3 is going to be due this Sunday at midnight. Somebody put up on Blackboard for you, as well as also we were supposed to have assignment 1 out last week, but after we didn't get quite what I wanted done, I figured I'd push it till this week. So it's out now. It's going to be due week 6 instead of week 5. So it gives you the same amount of time, just pushing it out another week. And it's, in my opinion, super simple. It's really for me to gauge how good you are more than anything else, right? So I want to see, it's going to be a mini portfolio site that I want you to put together. I'm sure you put portfolio sites together before. You can reuse some of that content. I'm not paying you for it. All right, the content necessarily. Let the stuff that's in there, and unless there's something that I'm specifically asking you to do that you haven't done, there might be some stuff that I'm asking you inside the document. And I wanted to start talking about that first before I get to the regular agenda today. So again, mini portfolio site assignment 1, it's worth only 8% of your final grade. So you got to consider that this is like worth 2 in-class exercises. Each in-class exercise worth approximately 4%, if I'm not wrong, right? So it's not like a huge endeavor. Sunday, October the 16th, which is, kind of the week that we're not together on the Monday because of Thanksgiving. So that gives you the kind of the week to practice and do whatever you're going to do anyway, which is pretty good. You're going to make a 5-page site that includes a home page, which is like a landing page, an about me page, or, let's call it a bio page, a projects page, a services page, and a contact me page. That's what you're doing. All right. So very simple. In this thing, because you guys are advanced client side, my expectation is that your contact page will be fully functional. That means you'll be able to send email, receive email, from the contact page. It has to be full validation, right? So that was, in other words, like it'll stop users from giving you crap data, that kind of stuff. And we'll talk about some of those things as we go forward. Okay, so that's what it's going to be doing. That's where probably a bit of a chunk of this is. You're going to be using TypeScript. So my expectation is you're using TypeScript to create your JavaScript on the back end. So it's required for this one. All right. So please don't just give me JavaScript. It's all TypeScript, which is going to test you on using that new technology that I'm introducing to you. There is some requirements for the pages, just basic. I've really outlined them at a very high level. Like, for example, a bio page that includes a personal logo and a recent image of you. and some kind of short paragraph that outlines your personal mission. All the text on the page should come from string variables in your app.ts file. This is really contrived. We don't normally do that, but it'll give you a chance to practice your TypeScript stuff. All right, so that's what it's there. A contact page that's fully functional with, that's where a lot of the TypeScript will be used. In the backend functions you'll have to support. I'm not telling you what functions to use, right? But you need to come up with that validation technique on your own. You could use jQuery if you really want to. You could use JavaScript, functionality with a TypeScript structure. But it's up to you how you're going to do this and how do you send email. There's a bunch of relay agents that I'm going to be talking about, but one of them, the biggest one, is SendGrid, and you can do that even with just JavaScript. Okay, so you don't need to use anything else. You don't have to have a server or anything like that. It'll just relay the email. But in order for you to do that, you need to get an API key and all that kind of stuff. Remember, we talked about making a private repository. This is where you need a private repository, right? So, or else SendGrid will cut you off. A projects page that includes text and images about 3 of your favorite projects. Any favorite projects. If you don't have any, make it up. Okay, I don't care. It's just, but this could be a little portfolio site, another little iteration of your portfolio site that you want to use for your prospective employer. Like I said, I'm sure you've done something like this in the past. Yes, maybe, I'm hoping, right? So this should be like a no-brainer in terms of getting this out. Again, it's only worth 2 in-class exercise worth of stuff. So it's really, I want to see what you can do. I want to see how good you can make your pages look, right? So it's not just about, content. It's about structure and presentation. We talked about, kind of 3 layers. So people who are great with CSS, my expectation is it's going to look pretty goddamn awesome, right? And if you're not good with CSS, you better bone up on it, because that's what I'll be expecting for those 60 marks that I'm going to give you for this thing, which is not worth 60 marks in my opinion. Okay. Some kind of nav bar structure. You can make it so that it's a nav bar or nav panel. It's up to you. I'm keeping this really vague so you can have a lot of, leeway in terms of the way you do it. You could have a top nav bar like we talked about in class. You can have a nav bar that is on the side or some other navigation scheme of your own, a mix. Maybe some breadcrumbs on, on a footer or something like that. You can do whatever you like. Things that will not allow, no themes. You cannot download a theme from Theme Forest or someplace else, and that's not your own. That's not your own code. So you have to make it yourself. This is all about you. So if I see any of that kind of stuff, you'll get 0 for this assignment. Okay, I'm telling you in advance. So please don't try and download stuff from somewhere else and all that kind of stuff. However, I will allow you to use any kind of stock photos if you need to, and those kind of things, because I don't expect you guys to be photographers, although it would be nice if you took your own stuff and used your own photos. There is a requirement for an image of you. Some people feel a little weird about giving an image of you, but it is your bio page. It's your portfolio site. So make it you. It could be a stylized image. In other words, it could be an image of you and some kind of style, head shot or whatever. It could be heads and shoulders. It's really up to you how you want to do it. But it's got to be a nice image of you. It's got to look nice. Please don't look tired in the image. Don't be drinking in the image. Don't be doing something weird in the image. All right. Because, keep it, safe for work. Right. So that way, when I look at it, it's cool. I'm just telling you this in advance because I've gotten lots of thousands. Let me put it this way, thousands of submissions of portfolio site over the years and years. And I've seen lots of, stuff that people think are funny. Please keep it serious. This is for you. This is your stuff. Right. So, that's what I'm asking you to do. Your services page should include services, what you offer, web programming, web development, mobile apps, whatever you can do that you want to offer. Imagine if you're selling yourself, you could also include on your bio page a link to your resume, LinkedIn, social media, that kind of stuff. This is totally up to you how you put it together. Again, and my expectation is that the entire site is uses progressive enhancement, is adaptable to different screen sizes. All right, at this point, so it should work on a mobile phone, it should work on an iPad, it should work on a desktop, like all the stuff that you've done up until this point. I want to see what you can do. Okay, that's what I'm doing, and that's where the 60 marks are coming from. Okay, in terms of your site structure, there's some stuff that I'm going to be looking at on the back end, and a couple of things I'm going to be looking at is you must have a contents folder for your CSS files. That's where I want them all to be. Scripts folder for all your script files, your JavaScript files, TypeScript files, all that stuff. Assets folder will include images, media files, all that kind of stuff. You have to have that kind of structure or some kind of thing like that. You will include Bootstrap, and I say Bootstrap CSS or your own CSS structure if you want to do it yourself, or if you want to use something like Tailwind, something more modern. If you don't want to use Bootstrap because your site might look too bootstrappy, I'm okay with that as long as you use a modern CSS front end framework. Okay, something like that. Okay, and some kind of icon font library is recommended, like Font Awesome, or you can use the one from Bootstrap, or you can use other ones, or you can make your own. Don't go crazy. Don't kill yourself. You don't have a lot of time. It's worth 8% of your final grade. So it's not going to be something that you want to, spend from now until forever to do. Make sure you get it done. Okay, so that's like 10 marks. So that's 70 so far. And then we're into your internal documentation. So this is not just about, putting some stuff together, but I expect you to do to well document your site very well in terms of, I need your file name, your author's name, your website name, your file description for every JavaScript file you have, right? And those kind of things. That's worth 10 marks. GitHub, you must use GitHub. I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to meter how you're going to do it. If you're going to do command line or if you're going to do it with a tool, it doesn't matter to me, but your GitHub repository must be well structured and must be private, and that kind of stuff, and accessible. All right. So, and finally, a short video, right? Because I may not have a chance to see it live with you, and I want you just to talk over your site. So show me your site, go over it, talk about your design, why you did what you did, all that kind of stuff. You may want to describe your code a little bit, but I don't want a line by line narration of what your code does. Okay, so don't say like, okay, here, Tom, I did this. It's a waste of my time, a waste of your time. I'm sure it's boring. So please don't do that. Say like, here's my my full contact page working. Yay. Okay. And you can see here that I receive an email, right? So it works. And here's some validation for my contact page. The stuff that I've asked you to do, I want you to describe to me and show me, demo it for me. Okay. That's going to be your stuff in your video. Your video is required. If I don't see a video, I will ask you to submit one. I will not mark your assignment without it. Okay. So please make sure you submit it. Again, this is worth 8% of your final grade. Things that I want you to submit with it is a zip archive of your website's project files, a link to your working and private GitHub repository with me as a collaborator, as well as a link to your live mini portfolio site hosted on some kind of cloud provider or school web server if you want to, that I can access. Okay, if you have access to that kind of stuff, if you can't do it live. But I highly recommend something like GitHub Pages or something else. Again, if you want to use Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure, or anything else like that is okay. Things that you cannot do is you cannot use PHP. So no PHP on the back end, okay? Because it's not a PHP course. So don't make it, so no WordPress, okay? Or anything like that. If you're going to use, if I see any kind of WordPress submission or whatever, it's 0 for the assignment. I'm just putting it out there just in case people make some weird assumptions. So no WordPress. If you are ambitious and you want to make a full stack site, like for example, if you have some prior knowledge and you want to put together your own full stack solution, right? Which means, I don't know, you want to have something like ASP.NET on the back end, and the front end is going to be all your stuff that I just put together. No problem. All the power to you. I don't think you can use GitHub Pages though. You're going to probably have to use Microsoft Azure for that one. I'm not going to limit you, in other words, in terms of how you do your back end. But you don't need a back end, okay? All you need is a front end, which means you can host it on Azure as a web app, on AWS, on Google Cloud Platform. We have a lot of free services to us. I don't want you to pay anything for hosting, okay? And I don't need you to pay for a domain, although that would probably be good if you're looking at making this your portfolio site. Like, I don't know, whatever your last name is, or your first name and last name.com might be cool, but I'm not going to tell you to do it, all right? It's good for you to do because you're going to kind of develop your own brand, right? Hopefully. So that kind of stuff is what I'm looking for. Questions around assignment 1, again, do week 6, 2 short weeks from now. We're sitting at week 4. This is completely doable with the level of skill you have at this point in your time here at Georgian. Okay. Questions?
I usually use a server which I pay same email. that server, I use the PHP net. And it's those information in the connection to the backend.
Let's talk about it after, but I don't think, I'm not gonna say no if it's just for that, but I don't want it for it, I don't want it to be for you, for it, hosting your site. I don't want your PHP to host your site, right? Because I want you to move away from PHP as much as possible. But if you're, I like what I recommend to you, if you haven't used something like SendGrid, like an actual relay service, right? Again, totally free to use and whatever. That's where what I recommend you do instead. But if you want to talk to me afterwards, okay. Anyone else have any other questions around assignment 1? Yes. Uh-huh. Just that? Geez. All right, go ahead. Yes. Yes. So if you have a prior design, this is why I'm not paying you 100% for your content in your design. It's included in the 60 marks. You can certainly reuse something that you already have in terms of a portfolio site. So if you have content from a prior portfolio site and it's going to help you speed putting your new site together, for me, I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't think I wouldn't want you to recreate something. I'm not going to meter you, and I probably wouldn't know anyway. Yes. Uh-huh.
If I reduce stuff that I put how much I put it, so obviously I don't want to do things. But like the content, if it's already posted.
Content is totally fine. Any of the content is fine. Any content that you have on your portfolio site, it's okay, even CSS, if you want to keep the same styling. Again, remember, this isn't meant to be a killer assignment because my expectation is you have a portfolio site somewhere. If you've done some work on this before, right? And if you don't, then put something together that's fairly straightforward, okay? So you should have enough time to do this in 2 weeks. I would start immediately if you don't have anything, all right? Because it takes time to gather information and stuff about you. Some people don't like, actually, some of the biggest problems people have is putting things together about themselves. They have trouble talking about that. There is a point there that I am asking you for something like a personal mission statement, which is like, why are you doing the stuff that you're doing? I recommend that, to put something like that in there for in a bio page. But again, it's like a short paragraph that outlines your personal mission on your bio page. I mean, it's really that straightforward. You might already have something like that, but the idea is that a lot of the text, any of the text that are going to be in your portfolio site must come from, or either be generated from, or come from string variables with TypeScript. All right, so it's not going to be something where it's just going to be hard coded into your HTML. Okay, I'm not looking for that. If I just see a hard coded text in HTML, you'll lose those marks. Okay, that's not the exercise. The exercise is not. There's a bit of, again, it doesn't make any sense in terms of real world because I probably wouldn't do that, but I'm just testing to see if you know how to get and post data from and using TypeScript. That's what it's for. All right. So that's my underlying motive with this thing. And it's also to see how good you are. All right. I mean, that's the honest truth, right? So any other questions around assignment 1? I think this can be a fun assignment. It's all about you. And then it'll get us into all the stuff that's required for your mid-semester test as well. And it'll get your juices flowing if you haven't had a chance to do that this semester. All right, so that's assignment 1. Let's move on. And again, this stuff is posted on Blackboard already. Let's move on to the next piece. Last week, we talked about ECMAScript 2015 and beyond. We also talked about Ajax, and I talked about how to, use Ajax to get data. We did a very small example on how to do that. We also talked really briefly about jQuery, and I just touched upon how to set up TypeScript last week. That's what we did, right? I was hoping to get our 5-page site started. We didn't have a chance to do that because of our time limitations, and that is what it is. I guess in another alternate reality, if we actually had a week 1, this would have been no problem, but we didn't have a week 1, so that slowed me down a little bit. This week, we're talking about MVC pattern, full CRUD with local storage. Hopefully we can get that started or completed, and deploying to GitHub pages and a bunch more TypeScripts. But first, I want to talk about the MVC pattern. Anyone ever heard of MVC? Did you guys, I know that's Rich is a big guy on that. Yes?
Yeah, it's pretty much.
ASP.NET? Good. So this is tying into that. So I'm going to talk briefly about how this is going to work for us. If you know things about the stuff that you're doing with ASP.NET, then this should be familiar to you. Again, I look at it like this, and I'm going to talk about it briefly in a couple slides. Okay, so I'm not going to try and do too much overlap between what you're doing with Rich and what you're doing with me. Really, you have your data, presentation, and logic layer, your model, view, and controller, and this is kind of a separation of concerns. Okay, and we do this so that if you're working in a more modern web application kind of environment with multiple people, that you can split up your concerns. You can have somebody's going to take care of the back end, you know, some people's going to take care of the front end, and so on. But also not just that, but to separate your code, to make it more functional, to make it more modular, so that we can, for example, if I want to have your front end on one server and your back end on another one, it's totally possible with using an MVC pattern. We're going to be structuring our code this semester and next semester, right, with an MVC pattern in mind. Okay, so when you see that kind of stuff, that's why I've introduced it to you, so you're not completely lost. Again, I just put here at a very high level what MVC is. Okay, and you should know this. Some of the slides might be even very reminiscent of the stuff you'll see with Rich. Okay, so that's hopefully that is something that you've seen before. Questions around MVC pattern and why we're using it. Okay, so I put it up there because just in case you don't know, it's there for you to read. But for the most part, we're going to be separating and structuring our site with an MVC pattern in mind, right? So that when we get to the back end, which is going to be a little bit of Node and Express, you'll have everything that you need to get going on that. Let's talk about local storage and session storage a little bit. I'll do a little bit of a lecture on what it is, and then we'll get right into it with code. Okay. So again, I want you to think about local storage and session storage as two new objects that you're going to be working with, at least for the first half of our semester here, right? So one thing is that the data that we can use can actually survive a page refresh with session storage. So I can store stuff on the page, right? Or a complete browser restart with local storage, right? So that's kind of interesting. But also, you should, in your mind, there should be some alarm bells going off if you're a security-minded person, right? Think about this. So local storage and session storage will survive a browser reset, right? That means that I will know stuff about you, or maybe put some kind of settings or preferences or whatever, and I'll embed that information inside of a browser without your knowledge. Okay, so JavaScript will not ask you, do you want to do this? Okay, it won't allow you, it won't say these kind of things. But I will be able to store information, you know, with or without your knowledge in your browser specific to my site, if I have a site that you're visiting. Okay, so keep that in mind. So again, alarm bells in your mind. I always say this to students: you go to any site, remember what happens. They know where you're coming from, they know your IP address, they know the browser you're using, they know, where you live for the most part. They can zero in within about 50 kilometers of where we are, right, at any time. Okay, because of your IP address. So it's pretty dangerous, and that's why whenever you surf a site that is, let's say, dangerous to go to, again, the big ones, and this is why I say, people have virus scanners and all this kind of stuff, and I say, for the most part, if you're careful, you don't really need a virus scanner these days, because they're almost like viruses themselves, McAfee and Norton and all those other terrible ones, right? But the reason why you might need it is if you're going to some kind of crazy site, like you're downloading a movie illegally or some kind of game, or you're some kind of sex site. Just putting it out there. Those are the big ones, right? So you go to those sites, if you're going to do any of that kind of stuff, even more important than anything else is the stuff that they can store and put on your browser, okay? It's not the viruses that you're going to get, but all the code that can be in your browser, a lot of it can be in this local storage and session storage stuff. So just putting it out there, be security-minded when you go somewhere. Remember, it's almost like you're being a guest in somebody else's house, and they're taking pieces of your hair and your skin, and they're keeping it like as if they were a witch. Okay, that's what it's like. Yes. Yeah.
So it's like, I don't think we often think about those types of things in terms of our clients. Some big people, I think,
Yeah.
like for them today.
Yeah.
But that's what the type of work.
Good, excellent. So you'll have, so this will be useful to you. So you'll know where to look and stuff like that for this stuff as well. So again, what I'm saying is they're going to get a piece of you when you go somewhere, no matter where you go. Okay, if you think you're safe surfing and it's a big site like Microsoft, Google, or whatever, you're not safe. They're tracking you, they're taking your data, right? They're getting information about you. So that's why a lot of people use VPNs, especially in airports, where they can do a man-in-the-middle attack, right? There's a lot of information about that. Or hotel lobbies or anything like that. You must use a VPN, guys, if you don't have one already, all right? And a VPN will connect you nicely to a server that protects your identity and stops them from understanding who you are or stealing your data or anything like that. I'm only mentioning this because once we start talking about local storage and session storage, you will get some ideas in your mind, all right? And please don't get the wrong ideas. I'm not telling you for this reason. We're going to use local storage this semester, at least in the first half, to mock up data, transfer. It's almost like I'm doing some kind of CRUD, create, read, update, delete from a site where we don't have any access to a database, but I'm going to make it seem like it's access to a database. It almost looks the exact same as that because that's what local storage can do. Okay, so putting it out there. So again, cookies, there's always things that says, do you want to be tracked? And a lot of our sites now will say, do you want to accept all the cookies, blah, blah, blah. That's a requirement now on a commercial site. Any site actually that's out there should ask you, do you accept, cookies being tracked or not? If you say no, then the site is supposed to not place cookies in, on the browser. You should check that anyway, right? To see if they do that, because if they can violate that agreement, whether they tell you and ask you or not. Okay, just letting you know, just putting it out there. So unlike cookies, everything happens, instead of a cookie going somewhere like to a server, that's not what happens here with local storage. Everything is stored on your browser, right? Which can be very interesting how it works, okay? Here's what both of the APIs, local storage and session storage, they have their objects. I want you to think about them as objects, and they have several methods that you can use. Here are the methods: set item, get item, remove item. So those are part of the session storage and local storage objects. Clear, you can get access to the key, and you can get the length of the number of stored items in those things. It's very useful. These are all very useful, and although very small amount of methods that you can use to store and retrieve data, okay? One thing to note that everything that you do on local storage is a string. So if you store something in local storage, everything is a string. You need to convert it from a string back into data. And a lot of times we might use something like, going to go forward here. We might use something like JSON, converting it to JSON. Here's an example when I want to set a key. This is how setting and getting a key works like. I set a key by saying something like localStorage.test, that's the key, is equal to 2. 2 becomes actually a string. It gets converted to a string automatically. It's not just a number anymore. And if I do a console.log and I do something like localStorage.test, I'm going to get 2 back. Okay, that's how it works. All right, which is kind of interesting. So test would be the key name, and I'm going to get and set that information as well. So this is kind of how it can work. I can also remove keys like delete localStorage.test, and it'll remove the key from local storage altogether. And I'll show you where that lives in a second. What about looping over data? So I have a bunch of data that I stored in local storage in different keys. Let's suppose each of the keys is going to be a number, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever it's going to be, which I can do. And I want to get data from those keys. I need to loop over them. And this is kind of a really terrible way to loop, because what we need to do is we need to get the key somehow, store it, and then we can output the key somewhere. And this is not great. Okay, so unfortunately, one thing we're going to notice is that objects that are stored in local storage are not by themselves iterable, at least not in this stage of this version of HTML. Okay. However, what we can do is we can do something like this, where I can make my own set of keys. And this something you may have not seen before, this object thing. Okay, so you may not have seen the object right? Maybe you did from stuff that you did last semester, did you? object. So object, remember we kind of talked about it last week a little bit. It's like curly braces. It's like making, if I use curly braces by themselves, if I said let Tom equal to curly braces, I create an empty object, right? Object notation. Or I can say let Tom equal to a new object, capital O, right? And now it's kind of the same thing. I made an object container, which doesn't have any properties, right? So here what I'm saying is let's make my own object that has keys, and I take all the keys from local storage and I store them in my own object, and then I can iterate through them with a let or a for of loop. A for of loop. That's another way to iterate. So we're going to see that as something we may need to do. All right. So iteration is kind of weird with local storage, but there is a solution, and this is one I recommend. Okay. And let's also talk about key and value. So again, key and value must be strings, but what you could do is you could do something like this, where I JSON stringify an object, right? As an example, I can take JSON data like this, and I can stringify it and store it, kind of in local storage. I could do that, right? So that's something to do. And then when I get it back, I can JSON.parse it back into data again. So that is a way of us, remember we talked about doing this? We want to serialize our data. Serialize means we want to encode it in some way. And we want to deserialize our data. It means we want to decode it in some way back into a class that we can use. Okay. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing today a little bit. All right. So again, think about everything is strings that we store, and everything we get back is going to be strings unless we do something about it. Okay. And I'm just going to stop in a second with all this stuff. You can also use events. So not only can you store stuff with local storage, but you can listen for the storage event, which is kind of neat. So we've already seen an event, window.load, right? On load. Well, this is kind of a window.onStorage, right? Kind of thing. So the storage event itself has a bunch of things that we can get. We can find out if something was stored in local storage or something was removed in local storage. So we can get that information, right? Which is pretty awesome, that we understand what's happening with local storage. So we can listen for any kind of changes to our browser as well. Okay. Okay. So before we move on to anything else, any questions around local storage and how you can use it? High level, if you don't understand. If there's something that's boggling your mind, you're like, wait, local storage, how the heck do I do it, right? Anybody? Let's get to it, because we have a lot of stuff to do, and I've done 30 minutes this time of stuff instead of like, an hour. So hopefully it'll give us more time to practice, which is what I'm hoping we can do today. Okay, let's get going. I'm going to stop this video, and then I'm going to make a new one for the demo that we're going to do now, which is going to be for your in-class exercise 3.